On Sunday, May 18, 1980, at 8:32 in the morning, the volcano Mount St. Helens erupted in southwest Washington state. Approximately 100,000 acres were in the blast zone. The destruction was awesome. Most of this land was timbered. Several thousand deer, elk, and other wildlife species were killed. The contour of the land was changed. 26 people are known dead, more than 40 are still missing. It will be years before scientists fully understand the environmental impact of the eruption of this volcano on the Pacific Northwest. One thing is for certain, though, that even now, life is beginning to come back to the valleys and the ridges of the Mount St. Helens backcountry. There are signs of life, deer, elk tracks right where we're standing, wildlife, grass is coming back. Man will have to take an active role in assisting the recovery of this area. It may be months, it may be years, but the Mount St. Helens backcountry will return to life.
To fully comprehend the environmental impact caused by the eruption of Mount St. Helens, it's necessary to know the majesty and beauty of the Cascade Range. Stretching nearly 700 miles from Canada to Northern California, these mountains form the spine of the Pacific Northwest. Douglas fir, cedar, and red alder trees growing straight and tall blanket the ridges and slopes. Alpine lakes, formed thousands of years ago by receding glaciers, nestle among the uneven peaks and valleys. Melting snows feed the mountain streams and rivers, which in turn provide the habitat and spawning grounds for the salmon and steelhead trout on their long journey back from the Pacific Ocean. Deer, elk, black bear, and other species of wildlife roam the valleys and uplands. Towering above all are the volcanic peaks of the Cascades, mountains with names like Rainier, Baker, Adams, Hood, and the Restless Lady, St. Helens. The mountain lies within the boundaries of the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. The blast area covers more than 100 square miles. All roads and bridges in the blast area have either been destroyed or covered with thick volcanic ash. The Forest Service has restricted travel in the area and made it clear that the only access is by helicopter. The unknown factor of the mountain stability is another deterrent to access. The blast zone itself is something out of a science fiction movie, perhaps not unlike what our astronauts saw on the surface of the moon. Flying over the edge of the blast zone provides a shock to the visual sense. The blue-green colors of the Cascades have become an eerie, pale, and ash-gray world. Tens of thousands of once majestic fir trees are uprooted and foliage-free, laid out in neat rows, falling away from the force of the blast. The pyroclastic flows of hot ash and rock, which only weeks before had boiled out of the crater and down the slopes, have cooled and become suspended in time. Spirit Lake, reflecting blue in the sunlight, is now dead, its shoreline choked with debris. Buried somewhere under the ash is the once scenic Spirit Lake Lodge with its owner, the contemporary American folk hero, Harry Truman. When Mount St. Helens began rumbling in late March 1980, it broke a period of silence which had lasted 123 years. The first earthquakes and tremors in early spring gave way to a series of explosions, increasing in size and sending columns of ash and steam into the air. For weeks, geologists and Forest Service officials closely monitored the mountain's activity and made plans to evacuate the area should a major eruption appear imminent. As the earthquakes and tremors intensified in late April and May, a bulge began to appear on the mountain's north slope. On Sunday morning, May 18th, a large earthquake triggered a catastrophic landslide on the north slope. Millions of cubic yards of rock, ice, and snow rushed down the slope, into Spirit Lake, and down the North Fork of the Toutle River. Within seconds, the mountain exploded. And the resulting blast flattened more than 100 square miles of timber. Volcanic ash and pulverized rock blanketed the area to a depth of several feet. A pyroclastic flow of rock fragments and gas, superheated to more than 900 degrees, boiled down the north slope. A column of steam and gas shot 65,000 feet into the atmosphere. The wall of water that roared down the Toutle River Valley swept away nearly all that was in its path. 1,000 people lost their homes. In the days that followed, residents were allowed to briefly visit their home sites to recover what belongings they could. For some families, little or nothing remained. Others faced weeks and months of cleanup once the flooding subsided. But this story is not of the mountain or its eruption, or the anguish of the days that followed, but of the road to recovery, the effort to restore the Mount St. Helens area to an environmental balance. Even as the ash cooled, planning began to restore the timber, the watershed, and the wildlife of Mount St. Helens. Thousands of people will be involved in this effort for years to come. We spoke with a few of them.
As you can see by the background in this picture, it's mostly timber blowdown and then of course heavy ash deposits. This particular volcano probably changed the whole aspect of management of the forest. Prior to the blast, the forest had resource management plans that were pretty well completed. This blast affected a major portion of the forest. There were about 150 square miles in the actual blowdown area, or the blast area, and then there were quite a few more acres, many more acres in the area that was affected by ash fallout, and which is causing a considerable amount of problems with logging, road building, and activities like that. Our planning effort now has to start almost from ground zero. We have to look at the effect on all the resources. We're making an assessment on every resource really that the Forest Service manages. There's wildlife effect, and many of the animals within the blast area were killed, and certainly it affected the habitat for a larger area around that. The recreation in this area, this was the major Mount Margaret backcountry, and it was a real recreation opportunity. As I mentioned before, there was a considerable amount of wildlife kill in the area. We estimate on the National Forest land some 300 elk and some 2,000 deer and many associated species, and of course an unestimated amount of small game that were killed. Actually, we feel that the wildlife will be coming back in the area as the vegetation comes in. The large game animals are quite mobile, and those that survived on the fringes, right in the area we're sitting right now, there are a considerable amount of elk tracks and deer tracks, which indicates they're now using this area again, and certainly we'll expect those to come back. It was heavy timbered at one time with many beautiful small lakes, and they're gone, or the timber is gone and the lakes now are muddy. Well, there's just effect on every resource that we are dealing with, and our job now is to make an assessment and a long-range plan, also a short-range plan for putting the area back in the best management. Obviously, it's not going to be the same management as was planned before. We'll have a different area of geologic interest. This is going to be an area that there's going to be a lot of scientific interest in the effects of volcanoes. No one, at least in our agency's history, really had anything to do with something like this before, so it's a brand new effort.
We're on the south side of the North Toutle Canyon, basically about 12 or 14 miles west of Mount St. Helens, and as you can see below us, the mud flow stops just about 1.5 miles downstream from this point. We are inside the area that was damaged by the hot gases and the ash fall from the mountain when it erupted on the 18th. The trees that you see here in this area were killed by the hot gases that accompanied that ashfall on the 18th. There was a subsequent ashfall on the 25th of May that deposited another 1.5 inches of sandy material in this same general area. The greenery that you see here is all recovered since that time. There was no green material here at all, and the fire situation in this area has become critical. As you can see on the other side of the North Toutle River, there's acres and acres of blown down timber. The problems associated with that are extreme fire danger, plus the fact it's very susceptible to bug damage. The ambrosia beetle and similar types of insects will infest this area, we feel, in the not too distant future, and the value of these stands will decrease rapidly. We do have stands that were damaged just along the edges, and we are putting up timber sails in those areas to remove that timber that has been damaged in order to prevent this further devaluation through rot and insect infestation. This material is very flashy. This is a Douglas fir tree. It's dead as can be seen. At first we thought they might recover, but the denuding of the needles and the crowns totally being browned out is just wiping the trees out. They're not going to survive at all. In the stands where these trees are really tight together, we have a fuel situation that is highly critical. Any kind of a fire starting in this area could spread to thousands of acres in a very short period of time. The problems that associated with this stand of trees that we see right here, this is a stand that's less than 10 years old. It's totally wiped out. We have to come in here and replant this. We have problems with the amount of stock on hand, the stock being the small trees we used to replant with. And we have to grow those trees in our nursery before we can plant them. So it'll be some period of time before this area is completely reforested.
Behind us here is the Cowlitz River. On a normal summer flow, the water level would be down approximately 25 to 30 feet in depth. So what we see out here is a real problem is going to be facing the residents of Cowlitz County. By an indication of the sandbars, this water here now is actually maybe 1 to 3 feet in depth. And if it was solid, a person can actually walk across this river. On the banks here, you can see that the actual bark from a tree was deposited in this area. All throughout this bottomland down here, there are numerous sites just like this. The water that was flowing down through here on May 19th, the day after, was actually flowing at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal temperature for this winter, or for this water, was between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So we actually had a slurry. It looked actually just like cement flowing through this river valley here, and with these logs or pieces of bark actually just burning on top of the mud flow as it flowed down the river here. We also have some pumice rocks, which are numerous out here, that were deposited from the blast itself. River miles from this spot here is approximately about 75 miles away from the mountain. So you can get an idea of distance of what this debris actually, how far it actually came down the river. The vegetation, a lot of the cottonwoods and the maples are starting to turn yellow at this time, and we feel because of the 3 to 4 foot mud inundation of these trees, it has suffocated the roots itself, and also with the high temperatures of the water that was flowing through here, with the thin bark, it actually probably just cooked the tree itself, and so we don't have much hope for all the vegetation basically within the flow area.
In addition to the problem of extensive flooding and its aftermath, another concern has been water quality and the possible pollution of rivers and streams as a result of the heavy volcanic ash fallout.
Well, we know that the ash that is emitted from the volcano is acidic. It releases sulfur compounds and chlorine compounds rather rapidly. It's not greatly acidic, and I guess we really don't know just how much is going to be required to change the quality, the acidity of the water that will be eventually applied to crops or consumed by municipalities. But we do know from automatic sensing devices that we have in the vicinity that we have received as much as about 225 tons of ash per acre on the watershed at distances out as far as 10 to 15 miles from the volcano. So we know that that massive amount of ash on the watershed is going to have a rather substantial effect on the way we receive our water supply in the years to come.
There used to be previously a river that has flown down through here. It cut through the road system down here and eventually ended up going into the Cowlitz River underneath the railroad bridge just down below here. The water actually backed up through here, plugged up this small creek, and has left, you can see, considerable amount of debris, and basically the water is just continually backing up river. In this particular case here is that in the Kelso-Longview area, we receive around 50 inches of rainfall per year. And we receive most of these rains in the winter season, and there may not be too much of a problem right now, but come this winter, if these small creeks, tributaries into the Cowlitz are not cleaned out, we're going to have a tremendous amount of flooding problems. We will eventually be reseeding a lot of this area prior to the winter seeding and incorporating the ash actually into within the mud flow. The mud flow actually itself went up these culverts and clear on the other side and actually went up about a mile up this other river, so it just backed up a tremendous amount of mud, and it actually backed the water up even farther back than that. Behind us here you can kind of get an indication of some of the damage that has occurred because of the mud flow itself. You can see some of the vegetation around this trailer site here, as well as the handle of the lawnmower, to get an idea of the depth of what the mud actually is in this area. Right now we're standing on approximately about 3 to 4 feet of mud, and this area originally was kind of a small weekend farmer type situation, basically 5-acre lots. The Cowlitz River, which is just to the east of us here, approximately 300 feet, when the mud flow came down through here, it came up over the banks and had flown out here across the floodplain that was previously here. Also, you can get an indication of the depth of this material just by this mailbox here. It's approximately 3 feet deep, and you can see that most of these people here are no longer here. They have evacuated and probably won't be back in here anyway this year. Another point of view here is that we do have in the area starting to grow some cottonwood seedlings. The soil is very low in nutrients. It lacks basically all of the elements, the key elements, the nitrogen, phosphates, and potash. To get this soil productive again, we think that it's going to take approximately about 300 pounds of nitrogen, 10, 20, 20 per acre to establish the stands again. These cottonwood seedlings, we feel, will not last very long here, basically because of there's no nutrients in the soil, and they're actually just going off the seed source itself. Back over on the right here, back in the far reaches of the hillside there's a yellow home that was deposited there on the mud flow itself. It actually originally sat about a mile up the river here and was lifted up off its foundation, carried across the mud flow itself, and deposited over there. The landowner said that little knickknacks and so forth on the windowsills were still on the window once it deposited on the far side there.
With more than 60,000 acres of trees flattened by the volcanic blast, foresters and timber specialists are faced with a salvage problem which is unprecedented in human history. To further complicate this, several massive log jams blocked the rivers and waterways which are used to transport the harvested timber downstream.
We estimate our timber losses to be 1,600,000,000 board feet. This is overall damaged timber caused by the eruption, and that includes all sizes, large timber, small timber, and different species. Of this total, we estimate that approximately 800 million feet we will be able to recover. we will be able to salvage this timber. In an area like this, we could use helicopters. There may be problems as far as contending with the ash, and we will have to see whether, perhaps working in the winter when the ash situation would not be so serious. That might be a way to work that out. This could also be logged conventionally with cable equipment, yarding it uphill to the landing and hauling it out. There's a lot of timber resource that is down on the ground and will go to waste unless we're effective in moving in here rather promptly and getting the timber off the ground. We figure that 3 years, we have about 3 years, possibly 4 with some species at the most, to effect this salvage. After that, the wood will be pretty well sap rotted out and lost.
The total destruction of a dozen bridges and more than 60 miles of road restricted ground travel to the forest and has provided the greatest single obstacle to salvaging timber. Forest Service engineers began plans to regain access to the damaged area.
What we're looking at here is what remains of the N90 Eagle Cliff Bridge. It's been pretty well taken out by the mud flow that came through here. We're about 9 miles south of the volcano. When the volcano erupted, of course, the mud flows came down the sides into the muddy river upstream and sent several million cubic yards of mud and ash down through this site. One eyewitness that watched the bridge go said it held for approximately 30 seconds from the time that the wall of water hit it, and then just in an instant was gone underwater. Total value of our bridges that are out is about $20 million. We also lost something on the neighborhood of 60 miles of road. Another $10 million worth of road damage from blasts and mud flows taking our river bottom roads out. It will be probably 5 to 6 years before we completely reestablish a transportation system that'll meet the needs of the management in this area. We've spent in the neighborhood of $1 million already removing ash from our roads. By the time we get it all cleaned up, the drainage is cleaned out, the culvert pipes cleaned from this granular material we've got here, we'll spend in the order of $2 or $2.5 million just removing ash from our roads and drainage structures.
From the first eruptions in late March, human safety was a foremost concern of Forest Supervisor Bob TOKARCZYK.
Continued law enforcement or the keeping people out of the area that's closed. We talk about the red zone and the blue zone. Initially it's 20 miles around the mountain, and then on the east side is farther. All the time we'll continue to monitor the mountain, so that if the hazard appraisal gets tougher, we'll move the people away. As it gets better, we'll get close to the mountain.
The eruption of Mount St. Helens destroyed 27 camping and recreational sites on the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. This will result in a loss of more than 1 million visitor days within the first year alone. But the Forest Service has been quick to respond to the needs created by a new tourist attraction, a national volcano.
Okay, now it's right between the 2 trees, right on the top of that bush. There's a red barn out there. It's above everything. I mean, it really sticks up in the air.
Yeah.
But it's beyond those last foothills out there.
Okay, so that's not the flank of it out there.
No. It's all a whole new complete rise taken up there with snow on the sides of it a little bit.
Yeah.
And that stop sign, the second stop sign out then, you take a left, and it'll say Highway 503 North, okay, and then you just get north and then just wind out there. Pretty soon after the good road, then you go into this kind of road going around through like this, but it's a good paved road. And it just leads you out there through little towns and white spots. Miles? Yeah, about 25 miles out there. Follow Road 503, and it'll take you out to Chalachi Prairie. And it's a pretty area out there, really pretty farming area.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're sure welcome. Now, we've lost approximately 100,000 acres of all this beautiful land, including our prime recreation spot, Spirit Lake. It's completely devastated. There's nothing left up there except tree stumps and ash. So it's a very difficult place to be. Not too many people are camping in our campgrounds that are open. As soon as it dries up, the wind starts blowing the ash, and the ash flies up through the air, gets in your throat and your nose, and gives you a bronchital condition that's kind of bad. So things have changed. We have a completely different situation here than we've ever had in the past. I call it the brave new world.
And of course, the new tourist attraction in the Mount St. Helens area established a new industry as souvenir stands selling a variety of mementos began springing up.
We think we're going to have to be a little patient in many of the resources and let nature take its course. We can do a lot of rehabilitation work, but this is starting kind of the cascades all over again in some respects. So we're going to have to be a little patient about the comeback of many of the resources.
Castle Rock here on the Cowlitz River is about 50 miles west of the volcano and was outside of the blast zone. But on that Sunday, a wall of water, mud, and uprooted trees came roaring out of Spirit Lake, down the Toutle River and into the Cowlitz, carrying with it houses, automobiles, and anything else in its path. These homes were evacuated. Right now, we're standing on about 3 feet of dry mud, silt, and ash. But the road to recovery from Mount St. Helens begins in towns with names like Castle Rock, Longview, Kelso, Cougar, Lexington. It's going to be a long and difficult journey. But these people working together with the Forest Service, Soil Conservation Service, other state and federal agencies are going to make it. And someday, hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll come back to the Mount St. Helens vicinity and see how once again this has been returned to a green, productive, and scenic area. I'm Don Elder from Castle Rock, Washington.